Hey, what's up? COVID-19, the novel coronavirus. I'm an English teacher. Usually I like novels. Has made us all become teleteachers, even if we had no experience doing that kind of thing before. It's left many of us teachers wondering, how can we best teach our students at this time? How can we help them learn and grow as we always have? That's why I made these videos. I call this series TIFTO, short for Tips for Teaching Online. Tiptoe through the tulips? I'm an education professor and a 20-year teaching veteran, but I don't have all the answers. Each episode, though, I'll try and share an idea with you. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach in teaching. But here's one thing you could consider. Modify or reject as you see fit. You know yourself and your students best. That all said, here we go with today's idea. When you're working in an online environment, you can't just expect to lecture and have students learn or even pay attention. In fact, this is the case even in a face-to-face classroom. Of course, it's always quite possible that students will pay attention, dutifully write down everything that we say, spit it back on a test, and then, well, that's that. The knowledge is gone because it was never really there that deeply to begin with. And we don't want that, right? We want them to actually know and own these concepts that we're teaching them. And the way to do that is to acknowledge that research shows that most students learn best through constructing knowledge, guided and advanced by teacher and peer interactions, as opposed to just sort of photocopying it or banking it from a textbook or a lecture or even a movie. So if we want students to learn deeply in an online format, we have to resist the urge to just rely on lectures or even movies, because that's not going to cut it in terms of knowledge for ownership. So what does? We often talk about a given unit, regardless of our subject area, containing key vocabulary we want students to know. But we want them to know more than definitions, don't we? We want them to really understand the concept behind that vocabulary. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume, perhaps incorrectly, that most of the people watching this video don't speak Yiddish. I kind of don't myself. I only know a little bit, but I know enough to know the word spilkus. Now, let's say spilkus was a key concept in whatever unit it is that I'm teaching. And let's say you're trying to learn that word. Now, I can give you a definition to memorize. Here it comes. The definition of spilkus is when you have no Sitzfleisch, right? Simple. If I were to structure an assessment that asked you to give me back that definition, I'm sure you could if you took the time to memorize it. Just like if you memorized the Jabberwock by Lewis Carroll, you would know that 'twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. What kind of toves were they? Slithy, of course. A student who writes or chooses that definition can earn an A on a final assessment and still have no idea really on a deep level what they've learned. So when we say we want students to learn vocabulary, we really mean, or should mean, that we want them to learn concepts. And when you know a concept, that means that you know more than just the dictionary definition of that word. It means that you possess a deep understanding of the phenomenon that that word describes. And how could you assess if students possess that? Well, you could ask them to articulate the key characteristics of that concept. You could ask them to generate a number of examples that illustrate each characteristic and be able to classify what is and is not an example of that concept. And if you want students to be ready to do all of that, then how can you, especially in an online format, help design the kinds of learning experiences that will prepare them for that kind of knowledge and ownership? Here's one way you could try. And it's a method that leverages the highly visual nature of the internet. You're going to need to spend a lot of time hunting around on Google Images to try and find just the right clip art. But fortunately for you, I did that. So here's Spilkus. And instead of just giving you a definition, I'm going to provide you with some examples. And I'm not going to give you all the examples at once. See, I'm going to give you a picture right here. And I want you to stop as you're watching and think, what do you think Spilkus could mean if this picture is an example? And think it over, formulate an idea, pause the video if you need to. And now I'm going to add another example. Now, how does seeing both of these images maybe force you to revise your initial theory about what this word meant? Now here's another image. How does that, in turn, affect and add to your knowledge? And look, here's another image. As your students go through the process of making a theory, seeing a new example, revising and refining that theory, they're actually constructing an understanding. Even though they don't yet know what the word actually means, they're on that journey to discover it. Now, of course, you need more than just examples, right? In what's called a Freyr model of classification, you also have non-examples, because those can be just as useful. So here's a non-example of Schmutz. Right? What do you think Schmutz might mean? And now I'm going to give you another non-example. The dude as probably the antithesis of Schmutz in many ways. And so is frozen Anna. So as your students go along, you're encouraging them to constantly keep updating their hypothesis as to the meaning of this concept. And there are all kinds of ways you can stop along the way, informatively check in, and you can keep on refining that meaning further. So right here, this is not Schmutz, but this I would call Schmutz. And so you adjust the hypothesis again and again. And finally, if the students haven't already arrived at that definition themselves, you can come in and do that final fine-tuning. So Schmutz means kind of having ants in your pants, having an inability to sit still. If your students are particularly good sports, you can even have them record themselves kinesthetically acting out the act of Schmutz. At least you don't have to worry about chaos in your classroom. At most, you're just going to have students embarrassing themselves in the comfort and safety of their rooms. So here's a Freyr chart, and I encourage you to go find this online and use this as the graphic organizer, perhaps, as the means by which students are constructing their knowledge of the concept you're teaching, and then maybe give them a blank one when it comes time for that final assessment. Because remember, in a distance learning world, students can just hop on Google in a second and spit back a definition. You have no idea if they actually know the concept. But completing a Freyr chart, well, that's not something they're likely to just find pre-made online, and it will really give you a much more genuine sense of whether they own this idea. So that's one way you can teach for deep learning and ownership by leveraging the highly visual nature of the internet. Try it out and let me know how it goes. You can always write me at edinfinitumpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, subscribe and/or check out my podcast, Ed Infinitum, at www.ed-infinitum.com, available wherever it is you get your podcasts. Bye now, and stay healthy.